It was the early spring of 1887, and the winds through the New Mexico territory came restless and dry, like the land itself hadn't quite made peace with the seasons. The CXB ranch lay quiet at the edge of a ridge, its low adobe walls faded by sun and silence. From the southern horizon came a lone rider, steady and spare. He rode like a man with nowhere to be and too many places behind him. His coat hung dust-heavy on a tall frame, the brim of his hat shadowing rust-red hair, and a face carved by wind and time. His name was Don Fortune, though he hadn't spoken it out loud in days, maybe weeks. He wasn't heading toward anything in particular. He just rode because stopping meant thinking. As he crossed into the ranch yard, a girl appeared by the well no more than 20, in a faded gingham dress and boots that had seen hard ground. She held a water pail in each hand and didn't flinch when she saw him, but she didn't smile either. "Who are you?" she called, her voice flat but not cold. It was the sound of someone tired of surprises. Don reined in gently, lifted his hat. "Name's Fortune," he said. "Don Fortune. Just looking for supper and a place to sleep off the trail." She stared a moment, weighing more than just his words. Her grip on the pail shifted. "We can feed you," she said, "but if you're smart, you won't stay the night." She turned back toward the house, and something in the slump of her shoulders felt heavier than the buckets she carried. Don slid off his horse, patting its neck. The animal gave a soft, grateful snort. He scanned the yard. Old fencing, a lean-to barn, the kind of house that held more secrets than furniture. "What's this, Faith, honey? Company for supper?" She stepped from the porch with the confidence of a woman used to turning heads. Tall, golden-haired, dressed in green silk with copper trim, her curves swayed with practiced grace. Her eyes, though, the eyes didn't match the smile. "Rena Barnett," she purred. "You'll stay a while, won't you, Mr. Fortune?" Don nodded slowly. The first girl. Faith was already out of sight, but her warning lingered. The air smelled like pine wood and something hidden. "Maybe," Don muttered to himself, watching Rena's smile stretch just a bit too wide. "I just stepped into something I ain't meant to leave." The sun hung low behind the house, casting long shadows across the packed earth. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of mesquite and something faintly metallic. Rena Barnett moved like someone who never had to chase anything. Her voice followed Don like perfume, warm, heavy, and meant to linger. "Faith's not usually so blunt," she said, walking toward him with a wine-slick smile. "She's young, doesn't quite understand hospitality yet." She reached out, brushing her fingers near his coat collar. Not quite touching, but close enough that Don felt the chill anyway. He didn't answer. His eyes flicked past her to the doorway, where Faith now stood half in shadow, arms crossed, watching. "Don't let her fool you," Faith said, her tone sharper than before. "She's been playing hostess for a long time. She just doesn't like when guests think for themselves." Rena's laugh was soft and sweet, but brittle beneath the surface. "Faith, darling," she cooed, "don't be ugly in front of company." Faith stepped forward, planting her boots with more weight than her frame suggested. "Ugly's what happens when you stop pretending," she said. Don glanced between them. The air between stepmother and stepdaughter was thin and cold, like a cracked mirror held together only by habit. Then Faith turned to Don, her voice lower now, more private. "Don't drink anything she gives you," she said. "Don't let her catch you off guard. And don't believe her when she tells you Cass is well enough to ride." Her eyes flicked to the porch window, then back. "My stepfather's dying, and she's waiting for him to be dead." Before Don could reply, Rena stepped between them, her smile frozen in place. "Why don't you let the man get settled, Faith?" she said, her voice still honeyed but with a sharpness at the edge. "He looks half dead himself." She turned to Don, eyes bright. "The bunkhouse is empty. And clean. You'll find a wash basin, a bed, and maybe a bottle of something warm." Don nodded once. Rena's smile deepened, not in kindness, but in triumph. Faith looked like she wanted to speak again, but the words caught in her throat. She turned and walked back inside without another glance. Rena watched her go, then leaned closer to Don. "She's had a hard time letting go," she murmured. "But she'll learn. We all do eventually." Don gave her nothing, no smile, no thanks. He took his saddle from his horse, walked to the bunkhouse, and stepped into the dark. Behind him, the house stood quiet, but nothing about it felt still. The bunkhouse was tidy, too tidy, like someone had cleaned it for show, not use. Dust clung in the corners, but the bedroll was freshly laid, and a chipped pitcher of water stood on the table beside a half-filled glass. A bottle of whiskey, uncorked. Don set his saddle down, glanced at the bottle, and turned away. He wasn't ready to sleep just yet. The main house flickered warm in the growing dusk, its windows glowing like promises. But Don knew better than to trust glow. He knocked once before stepping in. The smell of roasted meat and strong coffee filled the air, but so did something else. The kind of silence that waits for a crack. At the table sat an older man, large, grizzled, with a square jaw and a face carved by wind and years. His eyes were sharp beneath heavy brows, but his back curved awkwardly in the chair, a pair of canes leaning beside him like worn-out sentries. "Evening," the man said, voice a low rumble. "Cass Barnett." Rena said we had a visitor. Don nodded. "Fortune, Don Fortune." "Appreciate the food." Cass gestured to a chair. "A man's got a right to stop when his horse is hungry." Rena flitted in behind him, laying out dishes with graceful precision. Roast beef, potatoes, buttered beans, ranch fare, but rich tonight. Faith stayed by the stove, eyes on the bread she sliced with slow, practiced care. Don sat, quietly aware of the arrangement, Rena at Cass's side, feeding him with a napkin tucked around his neck. Faith across the room, quiet, almost unseen. Cass chewed slowly, then spoke. "You headed anywhere in particular, Mr. Fortune?" "Not anymore," Don said. "Best direction for some folks," Cass replied, less to disappoint. Faith didn't look up, but her knife pressed harder through the loaf. Rena smiled. "Cass and I are thinking of heading out ourselves," she said. "Once the ranch is sold, we'll have time for the finer things. Europe, maybe. Somewhere with music." Faith's voice cut the room clean. "You're selling the ranch?" Cass wiped his mouth with a cloth. His hand shook slightly. "It's time," he said. "You've got your schooling to look forward to. And me. I'm not the man I used to be." Faith stepped forward now, her face pale and fierce. "And what about the land? What about what she wants to do with it?" Her eyes burned into Rena, who remained perfectly still. "It'll go to good hands," Rena said sweetly. "You'll have your future, Faith. That's what matters." "Don't talk to me about futures," Faith whispered. "You've always been about endings." Cass exhaled slowly. Rena reached to pat his hand. Don kept his eyes on his plate, but his ears were open. Then came the sound, hoofbeats. 2 horses. Slow. Deliberate. Faith moved first, stepping toward the window, her voice low. "They're here." Cass looked confused. Rena stood. "Excuse me," she said. "I'll see to our guests." Don watched her walk out. Her steps were graceful, measured like everything else she did. Faith remained by the window, watching 2 shadows dismount and walk toward the house. Don leaned slightly, just enough for his voice to carry. "Friends of the family?" Faith didn't look at him. "No," she said, "not mine." The front door opened with a slow creak, and the air shifted. 2 men entered like they owned the space they hadn't yet earned. The first was broad, square-jawed, his slick black hair combed hard back like he meant to cut wind with it. His eyes were dark, and his mouth curled at the edges, like he found something funny and ugly in every room he walked into. The second was lean, more snake than man. He had a face too long for comfort, pale in a way that didn't come from sun or sickness, just design. His yellow-green eyes drifted like they were always looking for the nearest escape, or weakest link. "Evening," said the first, brushing his boots hard against the floorboards. "Didn't know we had company." Cass raised his head slowly. "Kemp, Safford." His tone was even, but there was a drop of something bitter underneath. "Didn't expect you back so soon." Rena appeared at his shoulder like smoke. "They just stopped by for a quick word," she said smoothly. "No need to fuss, darling." Blake turned to Don, narrowing his eyes. "You the hand they hired?" "Nope," Don said without rising. "Just a man with a hungry horse." Safford gave a thin smile. "Well then, stranger, might want to keep your ears closed. Business ain't for drifters." Don met his gaze, didn't blink, didn't smile. Faith stood in the doorway between rooms, her shoulders stiff, lips pressed tight. "They've been sniffing around for weeks," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Waiting for the buzzards to clear the sky. Cass's eyes flicked toward her. The corners of his mouth twitched like he might speak. But Rena leaned in, whispered something, and he fell silent again. "Don," she said sweetly, turning to him, "why don't you take your things to the bunkhouse? It's clean, comfortable." Her eyes glinted. Too much invitation, too little warmth. Faith's head snapped toward her. "He's not a fool," she said. "You're not going to box him up like you did the others." "Faith," Cass's voice cracked, weak but sharp. "That's enough." But Don heard it. That tremble beneath the authority. The fear of unraveling. Rena stepped forward. "You'll find a bottle waiting for you, Mr. Fortune," she said, brushing past him. "Maybe it'll help you sleep." She smiled at him then. And in that smile was everything he didn't want to know. Later, under a sky split with stars, Don stood outside the bunkhouse. The door creaked as he opened it, and silence met him like a trap with its jaws wide open. Then he turned, caught the glint of metal just before the latch fell. Click. Locked. The bunkhouse was still. Too still. Dust floated through the last slivers of fading light, and the smell of old wood mingled with something sharper, earthy, bitter, chemical. The bottle sat on the table like an invitation and a warning. A single glass sat beside it, already filled. Don didn't move for a while. He watched the dust settle, listened to the air, waited for the stillness to whisper its truth. Then he turned, walked to the corner, and picked up a rusted blanket rod. He moved slow, deliberate. Broke the narrow back window with a dull crunch muffled by fabric, shards catching the last gold rays like cracked glass teeth. He climbed through into the chill of night, landing in the dirt with the grace of a man who'd run from worse. The wind bit harder now, but it brought something with it. A voice. Soft. Urgent. "He'll be gone by morning." Don crept along the barn's edge, crouched low, and followed the sound. The shadows of 3 figures passed through the lantern glow behind the kitchen wall. Rena, Kemp, Blake, Safford. Their words flickered like their movements, sharp and fleeting. "He signed it," Rena was saying. "Took longer than I wanted, but it's done." "And the girl?" Blake asked. "She'll be dealt with, just like the drifter. We'll say he went mad, tried to kill us all. Cass dies a hero. Tragedy, you understand." There was a pause. A cough. Then Safford's voice, slim and slick. "You really think they'll buy that?" Rena's voice came next, low and cold. "They bought me, didn't they?" That was when Don moved. Inside the house, the air had changed. Cass Barnett lay in his bed, eyes half-lidded, breath shallow. A signed paper sat on the nightstand. Beside it, his revolver. Empty. Faith knelt beside him, her hand in his, whispering prayers that had long gone unanswered. She turned at the creak of the door. Don stood there, a sledgehammer in his hand, the look in his eyes like flint striking stone. "They're coming," he said. And then, gunfire. One shot. Then another. Cass gasped. Faith screamed. Don ran through the hallway, caught the blur of Blake's figure coming through the parlor. The hammer struck Blake square in the chest. The man went down hard. Safford raised his pistol, too slow. Don fired. The shot ripped through the man's ribs. He dropped, a look of surprise frozen on his face. Rena screamed, then appeared in the bedroom doorway, wild and radiant, holding a revolver like she'd always planned to. Her eyes flared. She aimed, but Faith moved first. She lunged, tackled her stepmother with a cry that was part fury, part grief. They struggled, tangled on the floor. Rena kicked, clawed, tried to bite. Faith brought the gun down on her head with a terrible thud. Rena slumped, breathless and still. The silence after was louder than the gunfire. Don stepped forward, took the pistol gently from Faith's hand. "It's done," he whispered. Faith dropped to her knees, trembling. "She killed him," she sobbed. Don knelt beside her, his voice rough with something tender. "You stopped her, Faith. You did what no one else would." She leaned into him then, and for the first time since he rode into this place, Don Fortune held something worth staying for. Morning came heavy with silence. The wind had stilled. Even the birds kept quiet, as if the ranch itself needed time to breathe. The sheriff's men arrived around midday. The sound of hooves and metal snapping the quiet like brittle twine. They stepped through the house slowly, eyes taking in what remained. The body on the floor, the shattered window, the bruises on Faith's arms. No one argued. No one tried to twist the truth. Rena Barnett didn't say a word when they cuffed her. Her face, once so full of painted charm and curling laughter, had gone still. Like a mask turned to stone. Blake moaned as they dragged him, battered and broken, to the wagon. Safford didn't move at all. Cass Barnett was buried that afternoon, beneath a cottonwood tree just over the ridge. The same hill where his first wife had rested for 20 years. Faith stood alone by the grave, her hands folded, lips moving without sound. Don stood nearby, hat held against his chest, watching the sky more than the service. No priest. Just the wind, and a girl's farewell. Later, as the sun drew long fingers across the porch, Don sat with a cup of untouched coffee, eyes drifting across the land. Faith joined him quietly, her dress brushed clean, but her face still rimmed in loss. They sat like that for a while, neither in a rush to speak, just watching the land settle, listening to the air become air again. Finally, Don broke the still. "You'll run this place now?" Faith nodded. "It's mine now, signed and witnessed." She looked at him then, full on, not flinching. "But I don't want to do it alone." Don said nothing, just looked out again at the horizon. The place where men like him always seemed to be riding toward. "Yesterday," she said, her voice softer now, "you told me that if I ever needed anything, I just had to holler." He turned to her. The smile came slow, tired, but true. "Yeah," he said. "I remember." Faith stepped closer, her boots quiet on the boards. She reached up, laid a hand against his chest. "Well," she whispered, "I'm hollerin', Don." And then she kissed him, not desperate, not grateful, just honest, just hers. He kissed her back, and in that kiss was the end of the road. Not the end of the journey, but the first place that ever asked him to stay. Evening returned to the valley the way it always did, slow, sure, and unbothered by what men had done in the hours between. The wind rose again, softer this time, tugging gently at the ranch house, whispering through the cottonwoods, stirring the dust where Cass Barnett lay at rest. Don stood at the edge of the porch, one arm around Faith's waist, the other cradling a cup that had long gone cold. The land stretched before them, broad and golden in the light, the fences mended, the fields quiet. He didn't say anything, and neither did she. There was no need. Some things you don't chase. Some things find you when you stop running. There are places in this world where time moves different, where sorrow sinks into the soil and joy takes root in its place, slow and stubborn. Don Fortune came looking for a meal and a bed of dirt and found something better than gold. Not fool's gold, no. Something real. Something earned. Something that stayed.